All right. So the big talk is about. We heard Belichick on Pat McAfee, and this, and everyone's speculating is the reps that the quarterbacks are getting and how they're being distributed. What's your read on it as we get towards the end here of camp, or as we get towards the beginning of the season?
So, number one, I would just say today, folks are coming to the joy practice. This is the biggest day of the preseason and training camp combined. Like, this will be the most reps all of the starters see against an actual starting defense, offense opponent, whatever it might be. So, today is bigger than the preseason reps, which isn't to diminish them. What I would say is, I think the reason that you've seen only just one series of Drake Maye so far is they only have about four viable starting offensive linemen. And to me, I would have sent him back out there for another series or two if the cost is just sitting out. David Andrews might want to have to hang out a little bit longer with Chuksa for. So be it. I think they will a little bit more on Thursday. But to me, I don't think Gerard and Alex Van Pelt have fully made up their minds until they see what this Philly defense looks like today. Because if they can't protect today, and May will be protected, he can't be touched. Why would you risk him more on Thursday in their minds, even if you need to throw him out there for at least a couple of series?
Okay. What have you been seeing from May? Do you think he's getting enough? Does he need more work? What is your read on him?
So the total reps between him and Jacoby Brissett are basically even. And so it's not really like a total workload standpoint. The argument, the quibble I have is the number of reps he's taken with the starting offensive line. And it's only been 6. And we all saw them last Thursday in that preseason game. He's not gotten any reps with the starting offensive line in training camp through 13 practices as far as I've seen. And to me, that's necessary because you have guys like Zuri Henry, all due respect, undrafted rookie, and Kellen Deach, who signed less than 2 weeks ago off the street, as his offensive tackles. And that's just not good enough for the face of your franchise, but that's how bad their depth is due to a bad offseason, I would say, rebuilding that line and an inability to coach up some of these guys. Not to mention their plan A of a core 4 playing left tackle already seems to be thrown out the window. So to me, that's the issue. It's not the total number of reps. I don't mind Jacoby Brissett going with starters. He's been better. Drake hasn't earned starting reps, but he needs to be protected better. And the only way to do that is with their starting offensive line.
You were talking about the offense. How important is it for the rookie wide receivers today? Is today the most important day in their development going against a good defense like this?
Huge, definitely. And I would say the Patriots defensive backs have given them a good look. But I look at someone like Jalen Polk, who in my mind, Wallach should be starting, I think, today and maybe through the rest of camp. He's been the most productive receiver. He's been the most consistent. And KJ Osborne and Tyquan Thornton, who started in the preseason opener, have really been starters in every single team period so far. They've had 3 catches apiece in the last 3 practices total. So to me, that's not good enough. And Polk's had more. Pop Douglas has been the man in the slot, 7 catches 2 days ago, 4 yesterday, both led the team. So he's got his spot. But I think this is big for Polk, who's been better than them. If you do that against another opponent, I just think that's an unassailable argument, and it'll really be time to start Jalen Polk moving forward.
Yeah, what did you make of them releasing Smith-Schuster, and what does that mean for the receiver room?
It was honestly about time. I mean, guys, I think their only approach, knowing that his issue, as they reported last year, right after the preseason openers, his knee wasn't 100% then. It's not going to be 100% for the foreseeable future. And that means a guy who they signed basically because of his yards after catch ability, and they didn't want to pay Jacoby Myers what he wanted. There's no advantage there now. I mean, he was in the bottom 10 percentile and a lot of separation statistics, yards after catch, all this different stuff. So their only hope was that he had a decent enough preseason that they could maybe pawn him off on some other franchise and be like, all right, we'll do a pick swap. You'll get the better pick and take the salary off our books, and we'll take, a 6th or 7th rounder in return for a 5th or 6th or whatever it might be. He stunk in the preseason. He stunk in the spring. He had a bad camp. And it's really too bad that his body betrayed him as a 27-year-old dude who at one point was one of the better receivers in the NFL. But no one was going to take him. He wasn't going to play here. He was arguably the worst receiver in camp outside of some undrafted rookies. And it was just time to cut bait.
It seems like this is the time, especially now with the joint practices beginning with the Eagles, for the bubble guys to really make their move. I mean, it seems like it's today, tomorrow, it's do or die time leading up to the preseason game on Thursday night. Is that an accurate assessment of the timeline for the guys who are close but not on the team?
Yeah, I'd say so. But if they have, say like a decent performance here today, we saw some of them flash against Carolina, right? Like Christian Ellis is a backup linebacker at a sack. O'Shane Ximines had mostly a good preseason opener. He's been rising up the depth chart. Marco Wilson, Alex Austin, these young corners who've been pretty good. Doug Kite had a really good piece today in the Herald about this. Completely unbiased, of course, commentary right there. But my point is, if they're so-so today and then show out again in Thursday, even though they're playing against Eagles backups, to me, that means a lot, because now that's 2 straight preseason games where they've shown you, hey, when the lights come on, I'm ready to play. And that, to me, you're building up a body of work as a bubble player anyway. But the deeper you get into this, if you're the better player, that's often the tiebreaker. Who played best last? Because that means they're building towards something better. And if someone faltered, well, maybe their best football is behind them this summer.
All right, what's going on with Matthew Judon, and how does this thing end?
Yeah, it's funny, guys, because we talked to the defensive assistants for the first time yesterday, and DeMarcus Covington, 35-year-old defensive coordinator, first year in that job, made a point. Felt like he came into his scrum being like, I'm just going to say he had one bad day. You guys have all had bad days. We can excuse this. To which I would say that's mostly correct. But his was in public, and his was a really bad day. And he's also been kind of hit or miss sometimes with the participation in camp. Now, for the most part, he's been there. And I expect him to practice today. And I'm really excited to see how he looks against a really, really good offensive line. But there's been no indication that I've heard, and they've gone pretty quiet on both sides of this negotiation, that there's been meaningful progress. I would just say, and this is for the kids out there, the vibes check the last couple of days has actually been pretty good.
Yeah.
Did I tell you I was in college 15 years ago? The vibes check. He's been at practice. He seems happy. We saw that in the preseason opener. You just hope they get a deal done sooner rather than later, because then they can rid themselves of this versus worrying about how is Matt Judon going to be going into week 1.
Why is he still on this team, though? And that's the one thing I can't understand. This team is far, far away from competition or competing for anything. I mean, the fact that Brandon Ayuk doesn't want to come here, and they've swung and missed at all of these impact players, no one seems to wants to come here. Why Judon's not going to be around when this team gets good? Why aren't they trading him?
Well, I think to that point, if you wanted to run with that through the rest of the roster, why would they have extended anyone that they re-signed when theoretically, guys like Hunter Henry aren't going to be around maybe next year, the year after, being a focal point of the offense. But their point is, as we reestablish the culture, not all of these players can be on the same timeline, because first of all, they need to all have to pay them in 3 or 4 years, and that's going to get too expensive, and you're not going to be able to do that. The second point is, I think they think he's got some good football left for the next year or two. Not to mention, he's just your best player. So yeah, if you come to an impasse in negotiations and he wants, $22 million per year, yeah, sayonara. Hopefully we get a conditional 3rd, 4th round pick for you. But otherwise, I want to keep my best players. I want to have buy-in from them, because then everyone underneath him looking up to see how he respects Drake Maye, which his issue so far have been with the front office. That says to me, I can't act any differently. In the same way that we've seen plenty of other past Patriots align with Belichick, that cultivated buy-in in a way that even on his worst days of ripping them in meetings, running them into the ground in practice, you still did what Bill Belichick said, because the veterans are doing the same thing. What Mayo needs now is that buy-in. You get that through players like Matt Judon. And yeah, he certainly went against the grain and made a scene a couple of Mondays ago, but since then has mostly been in line. And if you can't get him in line, then trade him. But so far, they feel like they can still do that.
Well, you were talking about why Hunter Henry. I mean, Hunter Henry is a guy, and you know this far more than I do, that's considered a leader in that locker room. He's the first guy out to talk to the media during that terrible, terrible end to the season. They always go to Henry, and he would always talk to the media. He was the guy that players look up to. It just seems like Judon sticks out. I mean, he's older than a lot of those other guys that you were talking about. The Patriots have clearly identified the core to move forward, and Judon is not part of it.
Well, but Judon and Henry are really about in the same age range. And I would say probably the same point in their, careers, right? Not to mention Henry's got the worst injury history, even though Judon's the one coming off the bicep. Before that, you'd be more concerned with Henry losing games due to, something happens in practice or a game. So for Judon, not only is he just better than Henry, and I get that Henry's going to play a part in the development of, Drake Maye and everything with the offense moving forward. But Matt Judon, I think, still is going to be a good player for the next 2 years. It may be 3. He might rotate into a smaller role in that 3rd year, but I would at least like to find out. That's the thing here with Matt Judon for me. You want to keep all of your best players if he's got that buy-in. Not to mention, if Barmore's out for the year, you have 0 pass rush, and I understand that you're not trying to win games. They want to find foundational pieces. But if they think Matt Judon next year, when I think they might be able to push for a playoff spot, can help them do that, you keep him around.
You think they might be able to push for a playoff spot next year?
I mean, fellas, we're a long ways away. Yeah. But when you have a lot of money in free agency. He'll have another pick that won't go to a quarterback that needs development. A receiver like Malik Neighbors is lighting up Giants training camp. If you get, and Malik Neighbors is a great prospect, you're not finding them every single year. If you get a player like that, though, to then go with Drake Maye, Jalen Polk is in year 2, Javon Baker's in year 2, you presumably tighten up your offensive line. With this defense, it's still got a good young core that you just extended. You have virtually no internal free agency you need to re-sign aside from maybe Jonathan Jones. Yeah, I think at that point, that's the goal, because that would be the next step from getting out of the basement.
They're going to draft that big tackle at LSU in the top 5 next year. I think that's the direction they should go in.
Well, I'll tell you, it's good news, and who knows? Maybe they could be. There's always a surprise team every year. And the getting a Malik Neighbors, I think, is a good chance. If you told me that there was one position where the Patriots will be picking that's almost a home run, sure shot getting an elite prospect at, it would be receiver in this day and age. Lord knows people have like Leatherwood, and there's offensive linemen that have not been good. I can't off the top of my head think of a receiver that was taken that near the top that's just completely like in the top 5 or top 10 that's just completely like gone burned out. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head.
Yeah,
if I can't think of it off the top of my head, Andrew, let's just say it didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen. But
yeah, it's an encyclopedia up there. And well, to your point though, Fred, when you look at the kind of longitudinal studies about positions that can make an impact earliest, offensive tackle is down at the lower bottom of the list. And let's just stick with the Giants. They take Andrew Thomas, who looks like this all-time bust as an offensive tackle at Georgia a couple of years ago. And now more recently, he's become one of the best tackles in the entire NFL. And they still have issues up front with the Giants, don't get me wrong. But Malik Neighbors still has to prove himself. But there are plenty of receivers, to your point, that like those guys can come in. Because just like the quarterbacks and some of the corners, honestly, they've been playing 7-on-7 since they were little kids. Mm-hmm. And some high schools now aren't allowing players to practice in pads until high school. So from a developmental standpoint, not only is probably the coaching in college a little bit worse given the systems for the offensive line don't translate to what they want in a pro system, so there's a learning curve there. But like these guys who are running the same routes, covering the same routes, and are able to hone those skills since they were, 4 feet tall, yeah, naturally they're going to be ahead of everyone else who's drafted at other positions when they're picked that high.
All right, there you go.
A lot of things need to go right in, these scenarios. And the one thing that's still they can't really tell yet is, do we have a head coach that can coach? The head coach who has never coached a football team before. All these things kind of fall under that umbrella. So I guess we'll get more chances to see how he handles the joint practices and how things go on Thursday night. But to me, that's the one thing that can't be answered until you get a few games under your belt and see how things are situationally for Mayo and see how the team is behaving and responding to him going forward. I mean, so far it seems okay, but Andrew, it's really hard to tell at this point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I completely agree, because even Gerard Mayo said he's going to make mistakes. Look, I would put him down like most rookie coaches. We're going to look back in January and be like, he might have cost them that game, not challenging that 4th down, not having the right clock management, or just not being able to do things in a way that a veteran coach would be aware of and be able to execute under that kind of pressure, because he's only been in coaching now for 5.5 years. And it isn't to say that Gerard Mayo won't figure it out in the long term. It's just to say that that's what rookie coaches do. So there's a lot going on here. But the issue to me won't be, okay, if he screws up and loses a game, that's bad. What's worse is if he doesn't learn from it and if the players are out on him. Because if the players are out on you, as any kind of coach in any kind of sport, nothing you do matters. And so that's why I bring up the cultivation of the buy-in, whether it's the Judon or all these extensions or whatever it might be. But just promise me, when we do the 17th anniversary show, guys, we're not replaying this clip of me saying today the Patriots might push for a playoff spot in 2025 unless they do it. Because if they don't, I'm just not going to show up. Dan's going to put me on the line and I'm going to hang up.
Well, if they go all in on free agency this offseason, they have learned nothing from their past mistakes.
Yes.
That this is not the time to go all in.
It wasn't like they did this 15 years ago. They did it 2 years ago.
Lightly sprinkle
up in their face.
Lightly sprinkle in free agency. You don't have to throw it all
overpay for a couple of guys.
Like a couple select guys. Don't go crazy. Don't get yourself in any trouble.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, Andrew Callahan, it's a pleasure, sir. Thank you as always. Enjoy yourself at camp today.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.